Hot topic on the agenda at City Commission tonight was about the harm reduction needle exchange program. Commissioner Michelle Turnberg tried to eliminate that program. Valley News Team's Ethan Kramer was there and brings us the story.
Since 2018, the Harm Reduction Center has provided help to those who may use drugs. The center also helps those find resources they may need.
For us, it's worked very well, but it's the whole program. It's not just needle exchange. It's the elements in which Narcan is given out, it's the elements in which we sit down and talk to people.
Valley News Live was provided with multiple photos of used needles found in the city of Fargo. Now Turnberg proposed that the city dismantle the needle exchange program.
I believe what we're doing right now within the city of Fargo isn't working. So, there are people that are arguing for the needle exchange. I would call it free needles because it doesn't seem like a lot of needles are being exchanged.
Turnberg has been very open about issues facing the city and saying this one needs to be addressed.
I get pictures from residents quite often. They're all over and they're pretty easy to spot. So it's not really an exchange unless I can be told some new information.
Funding used to come from taxpayer dollar, but now it comes from an opioid settlement. Turnberg says that money should be used on other needs.
So it's not taxpayer dollars, but I feel like that money could be better spent on counseling, treatment, maybe some other ways to help folks that are struggling.
Turnberg worries that someone could eventually get poked by a needle found out in public.
My fear is with them being strewn throughout the city like that, what happens when a worker cleaning up or a child picks one up? They've been seen near schools. And what happens when one of those folks gets poked?
When it came time to vote, the motion failed. 2 commissioners voted yes, those being Turnberg and Dave Pepcorn. Mayor Mahoney said this about their votes.
Well, you have to look at the scientific evidence, and you have to look at the experts that come in and give our reports. So our program has not changed in the 5 years we've had it, 6 years we've had it. It's got great reports. We've had great things that we want to accomplish.
In Fargo, Ethan Kramer, Valley News Live.